At the hotel, no one understood the German millionaire, until the black janitor spoke German. "That European man has been disrupting the entire front desk operation for over 40 minutes, shouted Victoria Hayworth, manager of the luxurious Platinum Manhattan Hotel, gesturing dramatically as three professional translators looked at each other in utter despair. German millionaire Klaus Weber stood motionless like a marble statue, his eyes conveying an explosive mixture of growing frustration and icy contempt. His personal assistant was frantically typing on her cell phone, probably canceling multi-million-dollar meetings that depended on this specific reservation. At the entrance to the lobby, Jerome Williams was discreetly cleaning the Italian marble floor, watching every movement of the strange scene that had been going on for almost an hour. At 35, he had learned to become practically invisible during his 6 years as a janitor at that 5-star hotel. "Mr. Rodriguez, call someone else," Victoria ordered the supervisor, who was already visibly sweating. "This situation is turning into an international scandal." The third translator, a specialist in European languages, shook his head in defeat. "I've tried everything. He doesn't speak French, Spanish, or Italian. He simply ignores us as if we were invisible." Jerome stopped scrubbing the floor for a few seconds and looked at the German businessman with an indecipherable expression. Something in his eyes revealed a deep understanding that no one else in the reception area seemed to possess, as if he were the only person in the room who truly understood what was going on. Victoria Hayworth paced back and forth. Her expensive heels clicked aggressively on the marble floor Jerome had just cleaned. "If we don't resolve this in the next 15 minutes, I'll have to cancel the reservation for the presidential suite. Imagine the financial loss for the hotel." "Mr. Weber owns one of the largest technology networks in Europe," whispered the junior receptionist to her colleague. "If he leaves dissatisfied, our international reputation will be ruined." The German finally spoke, speaking quickly in his native language and gesturing with controlled elegance. The translators looked at each other completely lost while Victoria Hayworth rolled her eyes impatiently with each passing second. It was at that moment that Jerome slowly straightened up, leaving the cleaning cloth next to the bucket. His movements were calculated and precise, like someone who had made a very important decision after carefully observing the entire humiliating situation. For years, he had witnessed countless similar scenes in that elitist environment, always remaining silent while powerful people mistreated less fortunate employees. But this time, something different shone in his eyes, a determination that no one had seen before. What no one in that luxurious lobby could have imagined was that Jerome Williams held a secret powerful enough to turn this diplomatic crisis into something completely unexpected, and that his intervention would trigger a series of events that would forever change the power dynamics of that hotel. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and are curious to discover the extraordinary secret Jerome is hiding, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue watching how a simple janitor is about to turn this hotel upside down. "My patience has run out," Victoria Hayworth slammed her fist on the marble countertop, making all the employees shudder. "That European man is turning my hotel into an international joke." Klaus Weber remained dignified and impassive, but Jerome noticed how his fists clenched discreetly with every disrespectful word. The businessman clearly understood much more English than he let on. His expression revealed not only linguistic frustration, but deep indignation at the rude way he was being treated. "Miss Hayworth," the receptionist interjected nervously, "perhaps we should try a different approach." "More than different." Victoria spun on her heels, her eyes flashing with anger. "I've already wasted 2 hours of my schedule on this ridiculous situation. If he can't communicate in English, he shouldn't be staying at a first-class American hotel." Jerome felt a familiar burning sensation in his chest, the same feeling he experienced every time he witnessed this kind of arrogance disguised as professionalism. His hands gripped the broomstick more tightly, remembering countless similar situations in which he had been treated like a piece of furniture by wealthy guests. The manager continued her speech, now gesturing dramatically in front of the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered in the lobby. "Just look at this, one of the hotel's largest suites, occupied by someone who can't even ask for an extra towel." "Victoria, please lower your voice," whispered the supervisor, embarrassed by the public scene that was unfolding. But Victoria Hayworth was completely out of control, fueled by the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences for her behavior. "No, enough with the political correctness. This is an American company, and if people want our premium services, they should at least speak our language." It was at that moment that Jerome had a vivid flashback to his own experience a few years ago. He had been unfairly fired from his previous job at a cleaning company for defending a Latino colleague who was being humiliated for not speaking perfect English. The bitter irony was that Jerome spoke 5 languages fluently, a skill he had acquired during his years of military service in Germany, where he had been stationed for 3 years as a communications specialist. It was a past he had deliberately concealed in order to land this menial job when he was desperate. "Perhaps we should call security," Victoria suggested with calculated malice, watching Klaus Weber as if he were an unwanted intruder. "If he can't communicate properly, he clearly doesn't belong in this establishment." The veiled threat echoed through the lobby, causing uncomfortable murmurs among the onlookers. Klaus Weber lifted his chin slightly, his posture revealing an unshakable dignity that contrasted brutally with the vulgarity of the situation. Jerome watched everything with growing indignation, remembering how he had learned German during 2 intensive years working directly with German officers in military cooperation programs. He had devoted entire nights to studying not only the language but also cultural subtleties, motivated by a genuine passion for understanding people who faced barriers similar to those he knew intimately. "You know what bothers me the most?" Victoria continued her toxic speech, now clearly showing off for the guests who were watching. "It's this assumption that we should adapt to them, when in reality they are the ones who should make an effort to fit into our culture." Klaus Weber's assistant finally lost his patience and began speaking rapidly in German to his boss, gesturing toward the exit. It was obvious that they were considering canceling the reservation and finding another hotel, which would mean catastrophic economic losses and an international scandal for the Platinum Manhattan. Jerome felt something change inside him. It was no longer just passive indignation, but a growing determination that he had learned to cultivate over the years of facing prejudice in various environments. His eyes met Klaus Weber's briefly, and for an almost imperceptible moment, both men shared a silent understanding of what was really going on in that lobby. The German businessman whispered something to his assistant, who immediately began typing on his cell phone, probably canceling not only the stay but also the million-dollar contracts his company was negotiating with American partners based in this city. Victoria Hayworth, completely oblivious to the financial consequences of her ignorance, continued her display of intolerance, unaware that every arrogant word was being mentally catalogued by Jerome, a man who had learned that sometimes true strength manifests itself at the very moment when others expect our submission. As the tension in the lobby reached a critical point and Victoria Hayworth prepared for her next public humiliation, something extraordinary began to shine in Jerome Williams' eyes. It was not resignation or fear, but the kind of silent determination that is born when someone finally decides that the time has come to turn years of injustice into a lesson that no one would ever forget. Jerome Williams had made a decision. He discreetly dropped the cleaning cloth on the cart and walked with measured steps toward the group surrounding Klaus Weber. His movements were calculated like someone who had rehearsed this moment in his mind for years. "Excuse me," he said softly, addressing the German businessman directly. His voice was low, but there was something in his tone that made several heads turn. Victoria Hayworth spun around, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Excuse me, you're interrupting a critical customer service situation. Return to your duties immediately." But Jerome didn't take his eyes off Klaus Weber. In perfect German, with a Bavarian accent that revealed years of deep study of the culture, he said softly, "Entschuldigung, Herr Weber. Es tut mir leid für diese unprofessionelle Behandlung." The silence that followed was deafening. Klaus Weber blinked several times as if he couldn't process what he had just heard. His expression changed completely, from frustration to genuine relief and then to deep curiosity as he watched this black man speak his language with a perfection that few foreigners could master. "Sie sprechen Deutsch?" Klaus Weber asked in a voice that betrayed his utter amazement. He wanted to know how Jerome spoke German so fluently. "Ja, ein wenig," Jerome replied modestly, saying he spoke a little, although it was obvious that his proficiency went far beyond the basics. Victoria Hayworth was completely paralyzed, her mouth open in utter amazement. The professional translators looked at each other in embarrassment, realizing that a simple janitor had achieved in seconds what they had not been able to do in hours. "That's impossible," Victoria finally exclaimed, regaining her voice, but now with a tone of panic. "You can't just. How is it possible that a janitor—" Klaus Weber interrupted Victoria with an elegant wave of his hand and turned to Jerome in German. "Wo haben Sie Deutsch gelernt? Ihr Akzent ist wunderschön." Jerome smiled discreetly. The businessman was asking where he had learned German and praising his pronunciation, which he found very beautiful. "Ich habe bei der Bundeswehr gedient. 3 Jahre in Bayern," Jerome replied, explaining that he had served with the German armed forces for 3 years in Bavaria. The answer made Klaus Weber's eyes light up completely. It was clear that Jerome not only spoke the language but understood cultural nuances deeply. His military experience in Germany had given him not only linguistic fluency but also an intimate understanding of the German mentality and values. Victoria Hayworth was suffering what could only be described as a nervous breakdown on live television. "This can't be happening. You're a janitor, you shouldn't even be talking to the guests." At that point, Anthony Davis, the senior supervisor and only other black employee in a management position at the hotel, approached discreetly. He had been watching the entire scene, and his eyes revealed a mixture of admiration and genuine concern for Jerome. "Miss Hayworth," Anthony Davis interrupted diplomatically, "perhaps we should let the situation resolve itself. It appears they are finally communicating properly with our guest. A cleaning lady. A cleaning man." Victoria was completely losing her professional composure. "Anthony, are you watching this? This person is creating an international scandal." Klaus Weber, who had understood every word in English, looked at Victoria with an icy expression that made the air around her seem colder. In clear, precise English with only a slight accent, he said, "The only person creating a scandal here is you, Fräulein." The impact was instant and devastating. Victoria Hayworth staggered as if she had been punched. You speak English all the time?" "Fluent," confirmed Klaus Weber with his voice full of controlled disdain. "And I understood every xenophobic insult and every display of arrogance that came out of your mouth in the last 2 hours." Understanding began to spread through the lobby like shock waves. Guests who had witnessed the public humiliation began whispering among themselves, their expressions gradually changing from curiosity to outrage at Victoria's behavior. Anthony Davis stepped forward, discreetly placing himself beside Jerome Williams. "Mr. Williams," he said formally, using his last name for the first time in years, "I appreciate your help in this delicate situation." Jerome Williams nodded respectfully, but there was something new in his eyes. It was no longer the resignation of someone accustomed to being invisible, but the quiet determination of someone who had finally decided that the time had come to show himself as he truly was. "Herr Weber," Jerome Williams continued in German, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to clear up some misunderstandings about your reservation. I believe we can resolve everything quickly." Klaus Weber nodded with sincere gratitude, but also with growing curiosity about this extraordinary man who had emerged from the shadows just when they needed him most. Victoria Hayworth, realizing that she had completely lost control of the situation, desperately tried to regain her authority. "Jerome Williams is officially suspended. Abandon your duties immediately." The threat echoed through the lobby, but this time it did not have the desired effect. Jerome Williams looked directly at Victoria, and everyone present could see how something was changing in real time. It wasn't fear or submission, but the kind of quiet power that emerges when someone finally decides to stop hiding who they really are. "I understand perfectly, Miss Hayworth," Jerome Williams replied with a calmness that bordered on the supernatural. "But before I retire, I would like to make sure that our guest is treated with the respect he deserves." What Victoria Hayworth couldn't see, blinded by her arrogance and prejudice, was that every disrespectful word, every discriminatory gesture had been carefully observed not only by Jerome Williams, but also by Klaus Weber, a man whose international influence could turn that prosperous hotel into ancient history with a single phone call. As the tension in the lobby reached a critical point and Victoria Hayworth prepared to further intensify her campaign of humiliation, something extraordinary was beginning to take shape in the air. It wasn't just an employee standing up for a guest, but the beginning of a transformation that would reveal the true nature of every person present at that decisive moment, proving that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is precisely the one everyone has decided to ignore. The lobby of the Platinum Manhattan became a theater where Victoria Hayworth was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong opponents for her display of prejudice and arrogance. Klaus Weber elegantly took out his phone and activated the recorder that had been running discreetly throughout this public humiliation. "Miss Hayworth," he said in a voice as cold as ice, "I would like to clarify a few things about my identity before this conversation ends." Victoria was visibly panicking. Her face alternated between red with anger and white with growing terror. "I don't understand what's going on here. This situation is completely out of control. My full name is Klaus Weber, CEO of Weber Technologies International," continued the businessman, his voice echoing through the now completely silent lobby. "Our company has corporate hosting contracts worth $15 million annually with American hotel chains. The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony Davis, the senior supervisor, closed his eyes momentarily, realizing the magnitude of the catastrophe Victoria had created. The other employees looked at each other with expressions of growing horror. Furthermore, Klaus Weber continued relentlessly, I am a member of the European Council for the Certification of Executive Hospitality Establishments. A negative recommendation from me could mean the cancellation of contracts worth tens of millions of dollars a year. Victoria Hayworth began to shake visibly, finally understanding that she was not dealing with just any tourist, but with someone who had enough power to completely destroy the hotel's reputation with a single decision. But more importantly, Klaus Weber raised his voice slightly, ensuring that everyone in the lobby could hear him clearly, is that for the past 2 hours, I have recorded every prejudiced word, every discriminatory gesture, and every display of xenophobia that has come out of your mouth. That can't be legal, Victoria stammered desperately. Conversations can't be recorded without consent. Anthony Davis stepped forward with a professional but firm voice. Actually, Miss Hayworth, in public areas such as the hotel lobby, there is no legal expectation of privacy. All of our security cameras also recorded the entire incident. Reality hit Victoria like a devastating tsunami. Not only had her words been recorded, but they had also been filmed by the hotel's own security system, creating irrefutable evidence of her discriminatory conduct. Klaus Weber tapped his phone screen with precise movements. I have already sent copies of this recording to the tourism offices of 4 countries, to the national headquarters of this hotel chain, and to my public relations team in Berlin. No. Victoria screamed, completely losing her professional composure. You can't destroy my career because of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Jerome Williams finally said with an authority in his voice that no one in the hotel had heard before. Miss Hayworth, I have been working at this hotel for 6 years and have witnessed countless similar situations. The difference is that today your victim had the power to defend himself. Klaus Weber nodded respectfully to Jerome Williams before continuing with his devastating counterattack. Mr. Williams, I would like you to know that I took the liberty of investigating your professional history while observing how the situation unfolded. Victoria Hayworth appeared to be suffering from a complete nervous breakdown as she realized that she had completely lost control of the situation and that every second that passed only worsened her position. I discovered that you have military training with a specialization in international communications, have worked as an interpreter in NATO-German cooperation programs, and speak 5 languages fluently, Klaus Weber continued, addressing Mr. Williams. I discovered that you have a military background with a specialization in international communications, have worked as an interpreter in NATO-German cooperation programs, and speak 5 languages fluently, Klaus Weber continued, addressing Jerome Williams with genuine respect. You are exactly the type of professional my company is looking for to expand our operations in the United States. The impact on the faces of all the employees present was instantaneous. For years, Jerome Williams had been treated as disposable labor, when in reality he had qualifications that most hotel managers could only dream of possessing. Anthony Davis looked at Victoria with an expression that mixed disbelief and deep professional disappointment. Not only did Ms. Hayworth humiliate one of our most important guests, she also wasted exceptional talent that we had right under our noses. Victoria was now completely desperate, trying to find some way to save her ruined career. I can explain. It was a stressful moment. I didn't mean to. You said exactly what you thought, Klaus Weber interrupted her coldly. And thanks to modern technology, your true opinions about people you consider different are now permanently documented. Victoria's phone began to ring insistently. It was clearly her senior supervisor, probably already aware of the international catastrophe she had created. Her hands were shaking so much that she could barely answer the call. Hello. Her voice came out as a muffled whisper. Yes, Mr. Thompson, I can explain. No, sir, I didn't know he was. As Victoria desperately tried to justify herself on the phone, Klaus Weber turned to Jerome Williams with a proposal that would change his life completely. Mr. Williams, I would like to offer you a position as Intercultural Relations Coordinator at our American subsidiary. The starting salary would be $120,000 a year, plus full benefits. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Jerome Williams had gone from invisible janitor to international executive in a matter of hours, all because he had the courage to do the right thing at the right time. Victoria Hayworth hung up the phone, her face completely pale. They fired me, she announced to the room in a broken voice. Termination for cause. I'll never be able to work in the hotel industry again. Justice had been served in a complete and devastating way. Victoria had not only lost her job, but also her professional reputation, her references, and any chance of continuing her career in her chosen field. Meanwhile, Jerome Williams was finally being recognized for the exceptional talent he had always possessed. As Victoria Hayworth gathered her belongings under the contemptuous gaze of the same colleagues who had once admired her, only one question hung in the tense air of the transformed lobby. Was it possible that a single display of courage and dignity could completely rewrite the rules of power and respect that had governed that environment for decades, proving that sometimes true revolution begins with someone who simply refuses to remain invisible when they witness injustice? 6 months later, Jerome Williams sat in his office on the executive floor of Weber Technologies International, gazing through the panoramic windows at the spectacular view of the city he had once known only from the perspective of a janitor cleaning bathrooms and hallways. His transformation had been complete and inspiring. As intercultural relations coordinator, he had already implemented diversity programs at 3 associated companies, built commercial bridges between previously marginalized communities and the corporate world, and developed cultural awareness protocols that had become a national benchmark. Jerome, the meeting with the German executives is confirmed for 3 p.m., announced his assistant, Anthony Davis, who had left Platinum Manhattan to work as his right-hand man at the new company. The partnership between them had been extraordinary, 2 people who deeply understood the value of recognizing hidden talent. Perfect, Anthony. And how's our new intern? Asked Jerome Williams, referring to a young Latina he had discovered working as a maid at another hotel, a woman who spoke 4 languages fluently but was completely ignored by management. She's thriving beyond all expectations, smiled Anthony Davis, just as you predicted she would. At that very moment, across town, Victoria Hayworth sat in a small rundown apartment, flipping through newspapers in search of any job opportunity. Her dismissal from Platinum Manhattan had become a national scandal after Klaus Weber released recordings of his discriminatory conduct. Victoria's reputation had been completely destroyed. No prestigious hotel would even consider her resume. Her family had distanced themselves after the public exposure of her prejudices, and she had lost not only her career but also her social and financial identity. Social media continued to regularly remind her of her xenophobic comments, turning her into a national symbol of how prejudice and arrogance can destroy a life in a matter of hours. Every attempt to rebuild her professional image was met with a viral video documenting her complete humiliation. Meanwhile, the Platinum Manhattan had undergone a complete cultural revolution. The new management, aware of the international scandal that had nearly destroyed the hotel's reputation, implemented rigorous diversity and inclusion programs, mandatory cultural sensitivity training, and promotion policies based solely on merit and competence. Klaus Weber had become not only a regular guest but also a minority investor in the hotel, ensuring that the changes were permanent and meaningful. His influence had transformed the Platinum Manhattan into a national model of inclusive and respectful hospitality. You know what I'm most proud of in this whole story? Klaus Weber remarked during lunch with Jerome Williams at his favorite German restaurant. It wasn't just helping you find your true place in the world, but showing that when we recognize and value genuine diversity, we all win. Jerome Williams nodded, remembering that decisive moment in the hotel lobby when he decided he would no longer be invisible in the face of injustice. For years, I believed that my education and skills were worthless because the people around me refused to see them. I discovered that the problem was never me. And Victoria Hayworth? Klaus Weber asked with genuine curiosity, without malice. I hear she's working as a salesperson at a large department store. Jerome Williams replied without showing any cruel satisfaction. I sincerely hope she has learned something valuable about respect and humility. True justice is not about destroying people, but about creating opportunities for everyone to grow. That afternoon, as Jerome Williams led a video conference with executives from 5 different countries, translating and mediating multimillion-dollar negotiations with the same ease with which he used to clean marble floors, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him there. His story had become an inspiration to thousands of people through social media, documentaries, and motivational speeches, not as a tale of cruel revenge, but as proof that true power lies in recognizing our own worth regardless of the opinions of others. The most powerful lesson Jerome Williams had learned and now shared with audiences around the world was that the best response to prejudice is not hatred or bitterness, but unquestionable excellence that forces even the most skeptical to recognize the truth. Victoria Hayworth tried to humiliate him, belittle him, and make him invisible, but she ended up creating the exact circumstances that allowed Jerome to shine with an intensity he would never have discovered under normal conditions. Sometimes our greatest enemies do us the unwitting favor of showing us our true strength. Today, while Jerome Williams leads one of the most successful divisions of an international company, Victoria Hayworth lives with the lasting consequences of confusing temporary social status with real human value, demonstrating that in the end, true victory does not lie in destroying those who have hurt us, but in building something so extraordinary that any attempt to underestimate our greatness becomes irrelevant. If this story of transformation and justice has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to remember that their value does not depend on the recognition of others, but on the courage to show the world who they really are when no one else believes in their potential. The question remains, how many extraordinary people are you missing out on by judging first and getting to know them later? How many hidden talents are around you, just waiting for an opportunity to shine? And more importantly, when will it be your turn to have the courage to reveal who you really are, even when everyone around you insists on seeing you as less than you are worth? Jerome Williams proved that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone has decided to ignore. And Victoria Hayworth discovered that arrogance and prejudice are luxuries that cost far more than anyone can afford. In the end, the real lesson of this story is that competence has no color, talent has no social class, and dignity cannot be bought or sold, only recognized by those wise enough to see beyond superficial appearances.